The Holy Gospel according to Mark. And Jesus went home. And the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying he has gone out of his mind. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons. And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, then that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man, then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemies against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, for he is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said, he has an unclean spirit. Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. The crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you. And he replied, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister, are my mother and brothers. The gospel of the Lord. I stumbled on an interview with a rather famous economist, and I know nothing about economy, named Daniel Kahneman. The title of the discussion was, Why We Contradict Ourselves and Confound Each Other. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in Economics for showing that the classic economic theory embedded in Western democracies that holds an assumption that human beings will almost always behave rationally in the end and make logical choices that will keep our society balanced on the whole is just, well, simply not true. Like I said, I don't understand fully what they talked about, but I got some of it, and it resonated with today's gospel to me. Because he talked about bias and assumptions and how we make decisions as people. We hear someone's point of view, someone's facts that are presented, and we immediately turn to our own stories and our own facts to contradict or back up our thinking. He puts it in these terms. He talks about system one. And system one is what we do automatically. For instance, if someone asks us to 2 plus 2, what is 2 plus 2? Our system one thinking can kick right in. We say 4. We don't have to think about it at all. But if someone said, what's 15 times 34, we got to stop and think about it. That requires system 2 thinking. If you visit England and you have to drive on the other side of the road, all of a sudden on the left side of the road, that would require system 2 thinking for an American because you're not doing what's normal. He said in this interview, and I quote, when I ask you about something that you believe in, whether you believe or don't believe in climate change, or whether you believe in some political position or other, as soon as I raise the question why, you have answers. Reasons come to your mind, but the way that I would see this is that the reasons may have very little to do with the real causes of your beliefs. So the real cause of your belief in a political position, whether conservative or radical left, the real causes are rooted in your personal history. They're rooted in who are the people that you trusted and what they seem to believe in, and it has very little to do with the reasons that come to your mind. Why your position is correct and the position of the other side is nonsensical. End quote. Is something true? What if not? Do we accept? Do we engage in system 2 thinking? And I wonder if our beliefs, our faith often remains a system 1 kind of thinking. We want our faith and our beliefs to be understood as system 1 thinking, as taken for granted. Quite frankly, it's easier that way. Then something happens in life. Something happens that maybe shakes you to your core. Maybe it's tragic. And I don't have to go down a list of things that this could be. You can imagine them, or you might be going through one of them at this very moment. Maybe it's something so joyous and so unexpected it challenges what you have always assumed and believed. Or maybe better yet, God comes and challenges our System 1 thinking. Isn't that what happens in our gospel? At least that's one way to think about it. Jesus is challenging their belief and their faith. Here he is casting out demons. Well, surely someone who can command demons must be one with the demons, they say. There can be no other way. System 1 thinking would dictate that. For surely he is commanding them by the power of, if he is commanding them by the power of God, well, that requires us to reevaluate everything, to test our biases and assumptions. Who is he? Of course, Jesus answers in a way to put their thinking in knots. Can a house divided stand? And no, if you blaspheme against me, you are blaspheming against the Holy Spirit, the gospel says. Almost as if to shove the genie back into the bottle or the child back into the womb, they say, wait, look, your mother and your brothers and your sisters, your family are at the door. Look, you don't come from God. You come from them. You are no different than the rest of us. Go home with them and stop messing with our thinking. But even with his own family, Jesus challenges what we are calling System 1 thinking. Who is my family? Who is your family? He challenges even the most treasured, most revered, and important relationship in their lives, namely that of their families. And if you think families are important today, they were even more so in his day. Our family ties and allegiances have always been and must be the most important ties and allegiances that we have. But he challenges even this System 1 thinking. He challenges even those ties. Of course, the problem is we have taken what Jesus did and we fit what we believe and what we do know, yes, to be true, that he was and is of God. He's not of Beelzebul, of the devil, and that he claims power over the evils of this world in God's name and through the power of a good and gracious God. But we make that into System 1 thinking as well. We take it for granted. And we do not let it challenge our thinking and, yes, challenge even our allegiances, even the most important of our lives. I mean, clearly, we are called to cling to and love our families. Let us not forget that this is the one who, from the cross, called on his disciple to care for and love his own mother and vice versa. He is the one who gave back the child presumed dead to his mother. Ideally, it is in our families where we begin to learn what is the will of God in our lives. But we must allow God to challenge our assumptions. For instance, our assumptions of what makes for a healthy and happy family. Or for instance, the assumption that only our families are our families. That our family trees are somehow limited. When in truth, Jesus says, all who do the will of God are his brothers and sisters, his mother, and therefore our brothers and sisters. And that maybe we blaspheme against the Holy Spirit when we think otherwise. The simple good news is that Jesus turns to all who are seated before him and says, here is my family, all who do the will of God. And what are they doing? They're simply sitting at his feet, sitting before him, which ultimately is the will of God. They're sitting there at his feet, and you know what? I like to imagine that the crowd grows slowly. It grows because each time Jesus cast out a demon, that new person, that redeemed person, that cured person, that person unleashed from the power of sin and madness, whether they were mad with envy or mad with some disease, mad with evil in them, mad with anger, mad with jealousy or rage, whatever it was that possessed them and separated them from loved ones, once they are healed by this one from Galilee who claims all as his family, they too are free to sit at his feet and to be one with the crowd. Which is maybe in part what bothers those religious leaders. They aren't controlling who is in and who is out. And if they are controlling it, then their power is diminished. They are not the gatekeeper any longer. Jesus is, and he opens the gate for all to be healed. He opens the gate for those who are standing there and even blaspheming against him and denying him. They too are invited to sit with those who, well, were crazy and go crazy for him.